Senate will come to order. The senators will please take their seats. The senators all in attendance will stand and be led in an invocation by the Honorable Ghazala Hashmi, 10th Senatorial District. Following the invocation, all will remain standing and be led in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States by Linda Whetstone, Senior Systems Analyst, Virginia Senate Clerk's Office.
Let us pray. Bismillahir-Rahman-ir-Rahim. In the name of our Creator, the most gracious, the most merciful. God is the light of the heavens and of the earth. His light is like a niche that houses a lamp. The lamp is held safe inside a crystal which shines as if it is a pearl, a radiant star, lit from the oil of a blessed olive tree that is neither of the east nor of the west. The oil itself is luminous, though no fire touches it, light upon light. God guides to his light whom he wills. God provides parables for all people to reveal truth to those who seek it and to conceal the truth from those who are indifferent. God has full knowledge of all things. May our divine Creator grant us light, grant us compassion, grant us mercy and grace, that we may seek truth through these times. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk will call the roll. All those in attendance will please record their vote aye. Clerk will close the roll.
You have a quorum, Mr. President. Senate Journal for Thursday, August 27, 2020.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards moves that the reading of the journal be waived. All in favor of waiving the reading of the journal will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 28, noes 5.
Ayes 28, noes 5. The reading of the journal is waived. The clerk will report any communication from the House of Delegates.
We do not have any, sir.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The clerk will report any communication from the governor.
We do not have any, sir.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Resolutions, petitions, and bills are now in order. Senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas. Okay. Is there any business to come in the morning hours? Senator from Hanover, Senator McDougall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, if the record could please reflect that the senator from Rockingham is away on pressing personal business, or the journal, in case the record's unavailable.
Thank the Senator. The journal will so reflect. Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the journal also reflect that the gentleman from Spotsylvania, Senator Reeves, is away on pressing personal business?
Thank the Senator. The journal will so reflect. Senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the journal could reflect that Senator Stewart is away on personal business.
Thank the Senator. The journal will so reflect. Is there any other business to come in the morning hour? Seeing none, the clerk will call the calendar.
Friday, August the 28th, 2020. Uncontested calendar, Senate bills on third reading.
Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate bills on third reading on the uncontested calendar, pages 1 through 3, at Senate Bill 5047 through Senate Bill 5096, be placed on their final passage in a block. Any senator desiring to remove a bill from the block, please do so after the clerk has read the number of the bill.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the Senate bills on the uncontested calendar, third reading, pages 1 through 3, Senate Bill 5047 through Senate Bill 5096, be placed upon their final passage in the block, with the understanding that any senator desiring a bill be removed from the block will do so after the clerk has read the number of the bill. All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The bills are before us in the block. The clerk will read the number of the bills.
Senate Bill 5047.
Mr. President.
Senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I respectfully ask that Senate Bill 5047 be taken out of the block and passed by for the day, sir.
Without objection, Senate Bill 5047 will be removed from the block and go by for the day.
Senate Bill 5095. Senate Bill 5041. Senate Bill 5052. Senate Bill 5096.
Question is, shall the bills in the block pass? That is all bills except for Senate Bill 5047. All in favor of passage of the bills will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 35, noes 0.
Ayes 35, no 0. The bills in the block pass.
Did I vote on that? Did I vote on that?
Regular calendar Senate bills on third reading. Senate Bill 5042, a bill relating to State Board of Health, public health emergency, patient visitation, notice to family emergency.
The junior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator Kiggins.
Mr. President, I rise to speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, this bill is a very important bill for Virginia right now. It deals with nursing home isolation. We've been through a couple iterations of this bill and have worked very hard with stakeholders. What this bill does is allow for a family or caregiver visit once every 10 days, either in person or virtually, for the patient. We have seen so much disaster in nursing homes when they closed in March. We watched what happened every day. I would read the newspaper. It was a different long-term care facility every day. I listened to Zoom meetings with medical directors where they were almost on the verge of tears just listening to what was happening in their facilities. We saw staffing shortages, lacks of PPE testing. The numbers of deaths grew almost on a daily basis. We closed our facilities and we shut out our caregiving team and our families. The days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months. We started to get calls at my office just from caregivers who were unable to get in the building, unable to see their families. Again, these numbers rose so much so that yesterday, when I looked at the Virginia Department of Health website, we had 1,340 deaths in long-term care facilities. There's a total right now, or as of yesterday, 2,527 deaths in the state of Virginia. So 1,340 were in our long-term care facilities. That's 53% of all deaths from COVID-19 in the state of Virginia were in our long-term care facilities. If we just would have paid some more attention and addressed that problem much earlier on, we could have watched those numbers at least decrease. So what has happened is that we've shut out our caregivers. They were an essential part of our caregiving team. They help with things that our patients need on a daily basis. They help do things that no one else thinks about. They help put in hearing aids. They help put in dentures. They help remove fall risks. They help make sure call bells are in place. They help relieve the staff, most importantly, who I think we can all agree are already short-staffed. They notice things first. And now this really important part of our caregiving team feels helpless and hopeless. We've shut them out. And I will say that some facilities have done a fabulous job. We read in the newspaper just the other day, there was a great article in the Dispatch about how facilities are dealing with isolation, and certain facilities have done window visits and drive-by visits, and we've done parades, and we've set up plexiglass boxes, kind of like the ones we have in here, which we should absolutely be donating at some point to a long-term care facility. We set up parking lot visits. We set up visits on the beach. We've done a lot of just creative things. We had one woman that got a job as a dishwasher at a long-term care facility just to be able to spend time with her husband who had late-stage Alzheimer's disease. So there's a lot of people that are doing a lot of things and they're being creative about it. So there's no reason why we shouldn't put things in writing and communicate to our families, what are we doing as a facility, what are we doing as a state of Virginia to allow this essential part of our caregiving team to participate in our patients' care. There are some facilities that haven't done a good job, though, and those are the people that I'm here to speak for and advocate for. Those are the people we hear from. We've heard the saddest stories of residents and patients who have lost weight. They see their family members once, or they have pictures of them, and they see them, maybe weeks or months later. They've lost weight for no explained reason. They're in the same clothes when they see them on a regular basis. They're no longer making eye contact with them. Most importantly, they're no longer smiling. They say that loneliness and isolation is as damaging to a person as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. There's a 2009 Harvard Medical School study that shows that if we allow 1 to 7 hours a week per family or caregiver visit, there's decreases in pain, pressure ulcers, shortness of breath, increases in immunity, increases in memory, and decreases in hospitalizations. But it's not just the physical health that we're worried about, it's the mental health of our patients. The increases in anxiety and depression that our patients are now experiencing are on the rise. This was a group that was already lonely, already isolated, and we've just made it worse. And not only just the residents and the patients, but the family caregivers as well. The anxiety and the depression, the guilt that they feel by not being able to participate in that care, again, needs to be addressed. So we're killing our greatest generation, not from COVID-19 all the time, but from isolation and loneliness. This bill is a humane bill. It addresses the quality of life in our nursing home patients and residents. Sometimes I question Virginia's priorities during this pandemic. We have a long way to go here in Virginia. I look at the things that are addressed in press conferences and whatnot, and I sit and I wait for long-term care to be made a priority, and I feel like we're not making it. There's so much room for improvement here. This bill is step one. So as we work towards a vaccine and rapid testing kits for facilities, we must find ways to stop killing our frail older adults, not just from COVID-19, but from isolation and loneliness. Requiring facilities throughout Virginia to establish written visitation policies for families provides hope for our most important caregivers and is the first step towards complete reunion and to the end of this involuntary confinement that we have condemned onto our older adults. Access to family and loved ones is an important part of every resident's health and well-being. And this bill is a move in the right direction for some of our most fragile and important Virginians. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding Senate Bill 5042? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 5042 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 36, noes 0.
Ayes 36, noes 0. Senate Bill 5042 passes.
Senate Bill 5013, a bill relating to possession of marijuana prepay penalty.
Mr. President.
Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate Bill 5013 pass. And speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I stand in the shoes of my good friend, Senator Stewart, who cannot be here today. But this is a common sense piece of legislation that actually streamlines the process now that we've decriminalized marijuana in the Commonwealth of Virginia up to a certain amount. And we have now transformed that into a civil penalty. What this bill simply does is that if someone is given a citation, a non-criminal citation for possession of marijuana, rather than if they choose to go into court and fight it, they also have the ability, much in the same way of a speeding ticket, to prepay the penalty to the court clerk and avoid coming to court at all. So this is a very good bill, I think, that will not only keep people from having to engage in the court system when necessary, but it also will streamline the judicial system by not clogging up our courts with these kind of cases as well, by enabling the defendant, the person that's gotten the civil citation, to prepay any fine that comes with the civil citation of possession of marijuana. And for those reasons, Mr. President, I renew my motion that Senate Bill 5013 passes.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding Senate Bill 5013? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 5013 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 29, noes 7.
Ayes 29, noes 7. Senate Bill 5013 passes.
Senate Bill 5029, a bill relating to issuing citations, possession of marijuana, and certain traffic infractions.
Senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move the bill pass. Speaking to the measure.
And Senator, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, Senate Bill 5029 changes from primary offenses to secondary offenses the possession of marijuana and traffic infractions of operating a motor vehicle without a light illuminating the license plate, without an exhaust system that prevents excessive or unusual level of noise, with certain sun shading materials and tinting films, and with certain objects suspended in the vehicle. A secondary offense is one for which a summons can only be issued if the offender is stopped for another separate offense. The bill also bans search or seizure of any person, place, or thing solely based on the odor of marijuana, and no evidence discovered or obtained as a result of such search and seizure shall be admissible in any trial, hearing, or other procedure. As I indicated, the bill bans the search and stop for smell of marijuana and the 3 other offenses. Mr. President, with that again, I move the bill pass.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding Senate Bill 5029? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 5029 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 22, noes 14.
Ayes 22, noes 14. Senate Bill 5029 passes.
Senate Bill 5033, a bill relating to court authority in criminal cases, prosecutorial discretion to dispose of a criminal case.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Serville.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill pass, and speaking to that motion.
And Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, if this bill looks familiar to you, it's because it's largely identical to Senate Bill 489, which passed this chamber 39-0 last session before it went over to the other side and never came back. But the bill before you has 3 material differences, which I want to highlight for you all so you know what you're voting for. First of all, the bill adds the concept of clarifying when a Commonwealth attorney has the discretion to drop a case. There have been situations in both Arlington County and also in Norfolk where judges have been refusing to drop charges when prosecutors tried to drop them. You may be a little bit familiar with that scenario from the William Flynn situation up in D.C., but in Virginia we have a long tradition of prosecutors being able to drop cases when they want to drop it, especially when the defendant doesn't have a problem with that. And this bill just makes clear that a Commonwealth attorney can drop a case if, in their view, among other things, the general deterrence value of prosecuting doesn't merit that, the limits on its resources make it so they want to drop it, or the circumstances relating to the facts of the case. So that's the first change. The second thing that's different is that the bill we passed last year would allow a judge to continue a case for dismissal over the objection of the Commonwealth attorney. This removes the court's ability to do that and says that a case can only be continued and either a charge reduced or dropped if a prosecutor agrees to that. I thought a more conservative approach was probably more appropriate for special session given our limited time frame, and so that's what this bill, and it would also be more acceptable to the Commonwealth attorneys, and that's what the bill, so this bill is a little bit more conservative in that aspect compared with the bill you all approved last year, 39-0. And the last difference is that the bill allows for the Commonwealth and the defense to agree to an expungement of a charge if a person fulfills terms and conditions. It doesn't require there to be an expungement. It just gives the Commonwealth attorney the ability to add expungement as that carrot to incentivize somebody to behave and rehabilitate themselves. So those are the 3 changes, and I'll just say that the bill as in front of you right now, supported by at least 11 Commonwealth attorneys. I believe VACA isn't really taking positions on it, but I haven't heard any complaints out of them because this requires a prosecutor's blessing. So I think they're probably okay with it, but they have not specifically told me that because they're just not in a position to vet bills right now. Americans for Prosperity also supports the legislation, and they point out that they believe this bill has the potential to save taxpayers about $46 million of costs in reduced incarceration expenses and save about 1,400 life years given back to people because we can rehabilitate them instead of incarcerate them. Having said that, Mr. President, I would hope we pass the bill.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the junior senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrissey, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, would the patron yield for a question?
Will Senator yield?
I'll yield.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Does this bill allow, after the matter is dismissed in court, for the defendant's attorney to say, move for an immediate expungement right then, or is it still a requirement that another court proceeding would have to take place at a later date in order to get expungement?
Senator, is the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. If you look at lines 40 through 43 of the bill, it solely states there that upon the agreement of the parties, the charge can be deemed eligible for expungement, but you would have to file a separate expungement petition after the fact. But it just makes clear that this counts as a bill that's eligible for expungement under current law.
All right, I thank the senator.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding Senate Bill 5033? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 5033 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 30, noes 6.
Ayes 30, noes 6. Senate Bill 5033 passes.
Mr. President,
Senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
I move that we reconsider the vote by which we passed Senate Bill 5029. One of our colleagues needs to vote again.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the vote by which the Senate passed Senate Bill 5029 be reconsidered? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 33, noes 3.
Ayes 33, noes 3. The motion is agreed to. Senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move again that Senate Bill 5029 pass.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall Senate Bill 5029 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 21, noes 15.
Ayes 21, noes 15. Senate Bill 5029 passes.
I'm sorry, I voted the wrong way to reconsider. I meant to vote yes. I just pushed it.
You did this one?
No.
Senate Bill 5106, a bill relating to local land use approvals,
So are you okay now?
extension of approvals
Okay,
to
okay.
address the COVID-19 pandemic.
Senator from Accomack, Senator Lewis.
Move the bill passed, Mr. President. Speaking to that motion.
Senator, has the floor.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, one of the reasons we're here is to address the great uncertainties that the COVID pandemic has wrought on our economy. And this bill, 5106, I think is an important part of that effort. 5106 seeks to reinstitute some certainty into the housing market and the development market, which has been wrought by the virus and the pandemic. What we saw in the aftermath of the pandemic was initially a lot of local planning offices were closed. To the extent they've reopened, it's been with limited staffing, and so that's caused a problem with some site approvals and some plan approvals. In addition, construction timelines have been delayed as construction companies seek to work within the health concerns of the pandemic and assembling crews. And in addition to that, there's a pipeline of projects that are not yet, and what we're concerned about is the pipeline of projects that have not yet been commenced and a potential shortage down the road for housing and available lots for development. Many construction and development plans were unable to meet their statutory deadlines because of the pandemic and these uncertainties, and also the economic uncertainty that the pandemic wrought. So what this bill does, it's simple and straightforward. All those plans that were alive and kicking as of July 1, 2015 are extended have an extension until July 1, 2022. And so what this only deals with those projects. Prior legislation that we've had similar to this in different circumstances related all the way back to 2004. This bill does not do that. We're concerned about this future pipeline and the uncertainty that could result in the shortage of building lots, particularly in Northern Virginia. And that's why this bill is endorsed and approved and supported by the Housing Alliance as well as the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce and the Home Builders Association. So with that, Mr. President, I move that the bill pass.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding Senate Bill 5106? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 5106 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senator desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 32, noes 4.
Ayes 32, noes 4. Senate Bill 5106 passes.
Senate Bill 5120, a bill relating to the General Appropriations Act, appropriation of funds for the Department of Elections.
Senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the bill pass. And speaking to the bill.
Thank the senator. You have the floor.
Yesterday, we had extensive conversation about this bill, so I will be brief in my explanation. What this bill aims to do is to keep voters safe from the coronavirus when they are exercising their right to vote. No one should have to risk their life in order to exercise their voting right. It also provides a safe alternative to using the U.S. Postal Service for returning ballots. As you know, even the Postmaster General has said he cannot guarantee timely returns. It adds $2 million to address the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on our upcoming election. It also provides direction on how the election is to be conducted. Specifically, it includes language directing general registrars to examine absentee ballots for errors or omissions on ballots received before October 31st and provides voters an opportunity to correct and validate their ballots up until November 6th. It clarifies that the failure to provide a witness signature would not render an absentee ballot void. And finally, it provides that general registrars include drop-off locations for voters to cast their absentee ballots. And it directs the Department of Elections to set standards for their establishment, including necessary security requirements. Because this is in the Appropriations Act, it would be effective immediately on signature of the governor. That's what it does. So I repeat, I hope everyone will vote for this.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman, rise?
Mr. President, speak to the motion.
Senator, the floor.
Mr. President, I don't think any of us need a strong tutorial about what this bill does. We had a very lengthy discussion about it yesterday, but I do think that a short reminder might be of some value. Mr. President, if there are people here that are concerned about the ability to vote, please know that the section of the bill that relates to drop boxes is clearly not necessary to allow an individual to safely vote. Mr. President, as we know, Currently, you have the full range of absentee ballots available to you. Not only that, we have moved that to a no witness, so no one needs to come close to a voter. Number two, we have the mail-in ballots, and I know some struggle with that, but there's no witness there. That is still available. Mr. President, we have in-person, at the car voting. We have curbside early voting that's available to you as well. Mr. President, there has never been a time that I think we've had more items available to us. But when you look at this bill, it appears, based on the rejection of amendments, that the strong desire is to allow for a drop box voting. That seems to be critical to this bill, and it is the difference between, I think, getting very strong support on other items that are in the bill and this bill. And the reason why is very clear. One is because this bill allows us to put someone or an organization between the voter and the ballot box. That chain of custody is lost in this bill. And it's not being given to a neutral third party, the U.S. Postal Service. It is being given to another organization, even an organized organization, even a partisan organization can take those ballots to another location. There's some discussion about the fact that there is an underlying fraud provision. Mr. President, as we talked yesterday, you're never going to get that. I would imagine that you will never find that, because what happens in the basement stays in the basement. We will not know what happens with these ballots if something is to happen. Mr. President, the other item relates to the drop boxes themselves. Discussion was yesterday that there were 30 states that have this provision. 30 states don't have this provision. The other states have provisions whereby there is a chain of custody that relates to a family member, an attorney, or a caregiver. Mr. President, we had that as an opportunity for us to consider voting for, and the idea of introducing that was rejected. Mr. President, I don't know the intent, and I don't believe it's proper on this floor to speak to intent, but I do think I know the impact. I think the impact is going to be you're going to have community organizers, partisans on the far right and the far left, canvassing and harvesting votes under this bill. Mr. President, they're going to be dropped in drop boxes that we don't have a security system that is even worked out in the bill. There's some discussion that there might be some regulation at a later time. I don't believe you will ever know if someone decides to attack a box, to pour bleach in the box, or to destroy the box, who dropped their ballots in those boxes, especially if those are done by a harvesting group that has gone out and got those, and they don't know what box they were dropped in. Mr. President, I think we could have had a really strong vote on this measure. We didn't. Mr. President, there is one item that we need to note, that in this floor substitute, there was the renumbering of things, but also there was a change in the $2 million, just to let you know. This is a general appropriation bill, quote unquote, but it's going through with a single appropriation. But in fact, that single appropriation went to a different line item in the floor substitute. Now, I'm told that it is a desire that is more technical, but before it was going to go to the administration that occurred in the Department of Elections. Now it's going to go for local governments. Mr. President, I've talked to Senate Finance, and I still don't understand the full implication of that as it relates to why. But I am concerned that this bill is flying through here under a General Appropriation Act, and its general one appropriation has changed between the committee and the floor. It may be an accounting difference, but it is a difference that I think that we should note. Mr. President, I think that the ballot is a sacred item. We should do everything we can to protect it, and I think this bill goes in the wrong direction. As I've indicated, we have plenty of mechanisms whereby we can vote, many more than we've ever had in the history of the Commonwealth, and I would hope, Mr. President, for these reasons, that we would vote no on this bill, and if there's still time, maybe we can come back and solve some of the other issues that are in the bill without having the drop box. Thank you, Mr. President, for your time.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the junior senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrissey, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking briefly to the measure.
Senator, has the floor.
Mr. President, I voted that SB 5120 be engrossed and advanced to its third constitutional reading yesterday, and I'm going to vote for the bill today. I also voted against Senator Newman's amendment yesterday, but I would be remiss if I didn't say the following. Senator Newman's amendment wanted to add 3 words that would require the voter himself or herself to drop it off. What I didn't like about the bill yesterday and today, and what I won't like about it tomorrow, is the fact that we're creating this drop box itself. It is unnecessary. As Senator Newman said a moment ago, there are a myriad of ways that you can already vote, including a box that's called the United States Post Office box. But you also can mail it in. You don't even, you can, with a stamp, you can go to the registrar's office within the 45-day period. We have no excuse voting now. You don't need this extra box. And what wasn't discussed yesterday, but is absolutely a fact, is the cost. We may have a drop box at every precinct in every Senate district and House district in the entire state. I've heard that it might cost as much as $3,000. It's unnecessary. It reminds me of the following. When I was in college and law school, I liked British Leyland MGBs and TR6. Those cars made by British Leyland, the problem with them is that you always had to repair them. Always. The problem was this, Senator Peake. If they could have 2 parts that did the function, they would have 17 parts that did the function, and one of those 17 parts would always break down. That's what this bill reminds me of. Why do you need this extra box at every precinct and thousands of precincts in the state, as much as $3,000 a box? Wholly unnecessary. But with that said, the amendment yesterday wasn't to delete the provision for the box. It was to make the voter, it was to in person go there. So maybe we'll see this bill again when it comes back from the other body. Maybe we won't, but I think it's, as Senator Newman said, there probably needs a lot more thought. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the senior senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove, rise?
Speak to the bill, Mr. President.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We went over this bill ad nauseum yesterday, but I do find two things actually interesting in this. First off, we're telling the Department of Elections they have to do certain things within 30 days of the passage of this bill. But as we heard from the eloquent senator from Richmond yesterday, they can't even follow the law now. I'm just wondering if they will actually have time to put this into their schedule so they can get it done as the General Assembly has told them to do. The other thing that's interesting is that the Department of Elections shall submit standards to the chairman of the House and Senate committees on privileges and elections, even though this didn't go through P&E. So, Mr. President, I do not have confidence in this bill, and I will not support it. Thank you.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is Senator from Fauquier, Senator Vogel, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm speaking to the motion.
Thank the senator. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to say that the senator from Richmond City is 100% right in his comments about the bill. The issue, among others, is this ballot box concept. And I am confident that I'm not the only person in this body who has received countless emails from people around the Commonwealth of Virginia. Many of them are election officials who have the charge of administering an orderly election in just a few weeks. And it's not just our election officials that rely on clarity and certainty about an election. We've all been candidates in an election. Candidates rely on that. But most of all, voters rely on that. And voters deserve that. And the most important thing that we in the legislature owe to everybody is to guarantee that in this election. And first, not embarrass the Commonwealth of Virginia by doing something that we, in our heart of hearts, know undermines the confidence and certainty about what will happen this November. We all have misgivings about what this bill does, and certainly the patron's intent is good, that nobody should risk their life to cast their ballot. And she's right about that. And there are pieces of this bill that are actually, that do good. But the issue here is this ballot box concept. And if you consider what we're doing by saying that anybody can take any ballots and go stick them anywhere in a ballot box that's yet to be determined, and anybody has access to that ballot box and can do anything to that ballot box, imagine if you're in a big urban center in Virginia where hundreds and hundreds of ballots have been put in a ballot box contained somewhere, and there's no custodian, there's no person to staff that ballot box, and the ballot box isn't secure. When have we in the Commonwealth of Virginia ever sanctioned something like that with something as sacred as the ballot? And when have we ever done something or made a decision like that just a few weeks before an election? And when have we ever done that and said, well, we're not really sure what the rules are going to be, but we're going to deputize other folks to make further rules about that, really in what will end up being not weeks, but probably, days before an election, really. And our registrars are going to be quite confused about that. And they've said so. And they've asked us to please exercise some caution before we do this. And we have time to do it right. We have time to think this through. And most of all, we have time to protect these ballots. And so I think about the district that I represent. It's different than a lot of districts that many of you represent. But I think about Winchester, city of Winchester, surrounded by Frederick County, Clark County's right next door, and West Virginia's next door. And I've joked about this before with my colleagues. I have friends that live in West Virginia, and I run into them in Costco or Walmart, and they say, man, you're doing an awesome job, and I voted for you. Well, I think about this analogous situation. There are people who will vote in this election, and they may see a ballot box, and they may live across the border in West Virginia, and they may put their ballot in the ballot box in Frederick County. They may live in the city of Winchester, and they may put it in a ballot box in Frederick County. They may live in Clark. And the question that's been posed to me, are those ballots going to be counted if they're put in the wrong ballot box in the wrong jurisdiction? How is that actually going to work? I mean, we have practical questions that we haven't considered, notwithstanding the fact that ballot boxes can be destroyed, that ballots can be destroyed, that someone could go around and collect ballots and maybe not even put them in a ballot box. And so I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't stand up on behalf of all of us who are candidates and who've been candidates and will be candidates in the future, for those who have to administer this election and are charged with the responsibility, the fiduciary obligation of making sure that these sacred ballots are collected and counted, and that everybody's ballot has the opportunity to be counted before the election's over, and that our election isn't thrust into chaos, and that the Commonwealth of Virginia isn't embarrassed when every other state's election has been decided and ours may not be. And finally, we have that obligation most of all to voters. And so I would say if we know that we can do something better, and we can make a better decision, and maybe slow this down a bit, and tweak the bill at a minimum, because I know this bill is going no matter what, I would just urge every member of this body to listen to what your colleagues have said. I listened to the debate yesterday, and consider what the senator from Richmond City just said about the ballot box. Yes, there are issues with the fact that there are going to be regulations made within a few weeks, and there are other issues with the bill, but the most important thing that we all have to consider is the unknowns around the ballot box, and the fact that there are other secure ways for these ballots to be counted and cast that don't put people's health at risk. And so with that, Mr. President, I would urge people to consider voting against the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, the senator from Bath, Senator Deeds, rise?
Rise to speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Hopefully to answer some questions. There's no evil in this bill. We're in a pandemic. People are afraid to leave their homes. There are people whose immune systems are vulnerable, and they need to be able to exercise their right to vote if they choose to do that. That's what this bill is about. You know, to my friend from Bedford, I would say that 30 states do have drop box legislation. I don't recall anyone on the floor saying yesterday that 30 states had exactly this bill. This bill is absolutely unique. You know, and as my friend from Chesapeake, the senior senator from Chesapeake pointed out, there is language in here that requires security. My friend from Fauquier talked about us delegating our responsibility to someone else. It happens every day. We require administrative agencies to come up with regulations all the time. The Department of Elections, you know, and that it's embarrassing to me that they didn't do what they were supposed to do on the other issue. That I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. But they're required, and I know for a fact they're working right now on developing security measures. And we required yesterday, with an amendment that was adopted, that they report to this General Assembly. They keep us engaged with what the security measures they do develop. I would say there was no evil in changing the language with respect to the appropriation. From the beginning, the appropriation was intended to reimburse localities for the money they spend having to mail ballots out. The money was always intended to go to reimburse localities. Maybe some language was changed, but that doesn't change what's going on with the money. And I would say to my friend from Richmond City that I appreciate very much his decision to vote for this bill. But his constituents and my constituents, there are people that just don't trust the post office. They don't trust the post office, and they don't know that it's such a wise investment of their money to spend money on stamps to mail their ballot when that ballot might not be delivered. And there might be a better way to make sure their absentee ballot gets delivered to the registrar. There's no evil in this bill. It's for all our constituents. It's up to us to make sure that everybody that wants to vote has an opportunity to do so. This legislation only affects this election. If after this election we find glitches, or we don't like this idea, it's not going to affect anything after this 2020 election. If we find things we think can improve the process and we want to make this permanent, we can have that discussion in January.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, the senator from Hampton, Senator Locke, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak in support of Senate Bill 5120.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say that any type of fraud is serious, and any protections that we can put in place should be put in place to prevent it. And yesterday, no, I'll get to that in a minute. Protections are in place in Virginia, and violators can be prosecuted. And absentee voting fraud is statistically non-existent. And yesterday there was a citation from the Heritage Foundation mentioned, and certainly the Heritage Foundation is not a bastion of liberalism in its thinking, but I want to cite the Heritage Foundation as well. The Heritage Foundation has documented only 202 convictions for fraudulent use of absentee ballots from 2007 to 2020. When one calculates that as a percentage of the number of mailed-in ballots during those years, fraud was minuscule, less than 0.1% over the course of those years. 3 of those cases were in Virginia. A woman voted for her deceased mother, a man voted for his deceased wife, and the mayor of Appalachia and co-conspirators tried to steal his re-election by buying votes with cigarettes and pork rinds and stealing ballots from the mail. Those were the 3 cases. And there are Virginia requirements strongly safeguard the vote. The ballot for under this particular piece of legislation and what has been put in place to ensure the security of this November election has been clearly detailed and outlined. The ballot of voter deposits at a drop-off location was sent to the voter's individual Virginia address only after the voter sent personal information to identify themselves and request a ballot in the mail. Registered voters must be U.S. citizens and residents of the locality that sends them a ballot. Each ballot mailed to a voter is tied to that voter by an individual barcode on the outgoing and incoming ballot envelope. This lets election officials and voters track ballots. When a ballot is returned, it is recorded in the Virginia voter registration system. After the barcode is read, the voter cannot vote again. This prevents double voting. Ballots are printed on special stock. They cannot be counterfeited. The bill requires documenting the chain of custody and returning ballots to the office of the General Registrar, where they must be kept secure and processed. Under the bill, bipartisan teams of election officers or the General Registrar or Assistant General Registrar or 2 employees will empty the boxes at least daily. Department best practices require that only election officials or election officers have keys to secure ballot containers. The bill requires the Department of Elections to add even more security safeguards as they deem appropriate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senator from Hanover, Senator McDougall, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. To speak briefly to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, we all know where the vote is going to be on this bill, but I do want to bring up 2 particular points for the members to reflect on as we go forward. And one of those points, Mr. President, was really, I think, focused on by the comments from the senator from Winchester, or the senator from Fauquier, and the senator from the city of Richmond. Mr. President, as we look at what we're doing, we are creating a system that is yet to be determined. The regulations are not going to be decided by this body, as the senator from Bath pointed out, but are going to be given to a state agency. Mr. President, we spent a lot of time yesterday talking about how that state agency has not followed the law. So we're going to take this year's election for president, election for our members of Congress, and we're going to tell the agency that just said, we're not going to follow the law, come up with the rules, come up with the procedures to make sure that this election is safe. Mr. President, it doesn't take my 8-year-old to tell you that is not a good idea. Mr. President, the second thing I'll point out, we've had a lot of discussions across the Commonwealth, but we've had a lot of unrest. We've had some riots, destruction of property, individuals have lost their businesses, had them destroyed. Mr. President, we're now taking ballots in boxes, putting them in public while we're all wearing masks. And if you think that somebody with a nefarious intent could not use that opportunity to change the election, how do you determine who voted? How do you know who put their ballot in? How do you know if their ballot was destroyed or not destroyed? So it's great that we have a bipartisan group counting what you have at the end, but if you're not able to determine what was in that box before it got destroyed, it could change an election. Mr. President, I will point out to this body, we have members here who won by handfuls of votes. Handfuls. And certainly in the other body, you had an election that was decided by a draw of a lot. Mr. President, it is important that we get this right. And Mr. President, this bill does not get it right. For Virginia, for the nation, because Mr. President, the nation could fall and rise on the vote of Virginia for president. We need to get this right.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards, rise?
Mr. President, I rise in support of the bill.
Senator has the floor.
We spoke yesterday at some length, and we're now speaking again today at some length. It's too bad this bill has become so partisan. This is a very important bill to make sure everybody gets the right to vote. Mr. President, what this does is to make sure somebody that cannot get out of the house. With the pandemic, there are a lot of people like that. But beyond that, there are a lot of older people that can't get out of the house for other reasons as well. And this enables somebody to vote. They cannot get out of the house. Now, the argument's been said, well, we have absentee ballot by mail. That's right. Has anybody paid attention to what the U.S. Postal Service has said? Absentee ballot by mail may not get there in time. You know what's happening to the Postal Service. I don't have to discuss that. It's been a disaster what's happening to the U.S. Postal Service. So the idea of voting by mail, it may not get there in time. So therefore, we need to go to this drop box concept, which is a great idea. 30 states are doing it. There's nothing novel about it. And the argument is, well, anybody can then take your ballot to the drop box. Who knows who that person is? Anybody can take it to the mailbox, too. Has anybody thought about that? How do you get it to the mailbox? Maybe you go to a friend to take it to the mailbox. Same thing. Take it to the drop box, take it to the mailbox. And so the security is the same there. With regard to the drop box, there's added security. First of all, the bill requires security for the drop box, such as surveillance cameras. It provides that drop box should be picked up daily by the election officials. And the ballot is checked by a barcode, it's checked by make sure the signature is the same. There are plenty of security requirements in there, just like the mail. Same security requirements. And therefore, Mr. President, we desperately need this, especially since the U.S. Postal Service is not doing its job to make sure the mail is getting there on time. We've seen what's happening there. We desperately need the drop box as an alternative to those people that don't necessarily trust the mail, or maybe it won't get there in time. They'd rather use a drop box. And the idea of security, that's a fiction. There's plenty of security with regard to the drop box. It's in the bill itself. And I think hope we can trust the election officials. I think we can. And therefore, they will do their job, and we'll make sure that when people vote using the drop box, they're the ones whose ballot is being counted. And so there's adequate security. I think the idea of saying there's no security is just a canard, and it's not a strong argument at all. And therefore, I'd urge everybody here, because of the pandemic, and because of what's happening with the U.S. Postal Service, to support this bill so that people can use drop boxes instead of the mail. And I just hope everybody would think twice about the necessary of having this bill, especially with the pandemic that we're now engaged in. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the senior senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll try not to repeat anything that's already been said, but we keep hearing about drop boxes put in random places. And I just want to remind everybody that the bill says the general registrar will put the ballot drop locations at their office, at already established satellite voting places, and on election day at each precinct. If the registrar thinks additional locations are necessary, they have the ability to do that, but they don't have to. And the Department of Elections is going to have regulations to address not only security, but a chain of custody. And there's some provisions already in the bill on that. Who's going to take advantage of these? I cannot emphasize enough, because yesterday during the debate, we heard if you can walk into Lowe's, you can walk into the polling place. The people most at risk of dying from COVID are not walking into Lowe's because they don't want to get COVID. Our elderly, people with disabilities and underlying conditions, people in nursing homes. We also heard yesterday concern about ballot harvesting. If you are isolated in your house or in a nursing home, and you're not going to get in a car with someone to go vote, you are not going to open the door to a stranger and give them your ballot. Nursing homes that are not allowing family members to visit, which we had a bill about this morning, are not going to allow ballot harvesters to come into the nursing home to collect ballots. It is the elderly, people with disabilities, people with underlying conditions, mostly Black and brown Virginians, who already are suspicious about whether their ballot is going to count. Many of them hold that ballot sacred. Many of them fought for the right to cast that ballot. And I think it's appropriate we are debating this bill on the anniversary of the March on Washington, where the youngest speaker, the last surviving speaker, who we lost a month ago, was literally beaten in the head for the right to vote, and fought his entire life, Congressman John Lewis, to ensure that the marginalized could cast that precious right. And what this bill does is make that easier in a pandemic that we haven't seen in over 100 years. For one election. Could it be better? Probably. Do we have time to make it better? Absolutely. But please, let's make it easier for those most at risk that if they catch COVID could die to cast their ballot. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senior senator from Chesterfield, Senator Chase, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak against Senate Bill 5120.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to speak again against this bill. If we cannot keep the streets of Richmond from being destroyed, how are we going to keep these unsecured boxes from being destroyed? Mr. President, there are many people across Virginia who are counting on us to do the right thing, to make sure that every vote counts. And they're watching us to make sure that we do the right things to ensure the integrity of our elections. And I can tell you that in many of those private conversations, that there is an uncertainty out there among the people of Virginia. And they're waiting, and they are hoping for a peaceful resolution. They are hoping for a peaceful resolution, and no one here wants a civil war, Mr. President. But I will tell you that there are people across Virginia who are tired of their voices not being heard, that are tired of messages being sent that don't represent the people. Mr. President, this is an unnecessary solution in search of a problem. There are already solutions in place for those who have health issues, for those who are nursing home bound, for instance. There is no different of a process of getting these ballots cast under the current system that we have in place than the new one that many in this body are trying to put forward today. This is an unnecessary solution in search of a problem. Mr. President, I would also like to bring up another point that I don't think we've really fully spoken about, and that is the cost, $2 million just for prepaid postage. We're not looking at the cost of additional workers that are going to have to go and retrieve all of these ballots from these boxes. Already at a time when maybe most people don't know, we have a tremendous shortage of election workers on election day already. And that's under the current system. What is the cost to the Commonwealth of Virginia? Are we writing a blank check? I thought we were here today to talk about the shortfall of revenues because of COVID. And yet we're looking at spending $2 million at least more. Mr. President, my concern is that this is a waste of taxpayer money that's going to be spent in a way that's not even a good value to the taxpayer. My other question is, where are these boxes going to be placed? Just like during the COVID crisis, it was not lost on me where these testing sites took place. Going into the inner cities of Richmond, targeting specifically minority communities to do all this testing so that they could get the results they want. What's going to happen with these ballot boxes that are unsecured? Are we going to put more in certain precincts than others? What about the impending lawsuits because of where these unsecured ballot boxes are going to be placed? Are there going to be continued lawsuits over the proximity and which communities and how many are going to be placed? Mr. President, I have grave concerns that we at the 9th hour are coming up with untested solutions with an undetermined cost to the taxpayer. We don't even know that it's going to work. Mr. President, this is an unnecessary solution in search of a problem, and I urge the body to vote against this bill. If we cannot keep the streets of Richmond from being destroyed, how are we going to keep these unsecured boxes from being destroyed? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is Senator from Alexandria, Senator Eben, rise?
Yes, briefly to address the bill.
Senator has the floor.
I wasn't going to speak, but there have been a few things said that I feel compelled to respond to, starting with what the senior senator from Chesterfield said, calling money to administer our elections a waste of taxpayer dollars. I think that making it easier for people to vote, we've had people in Northern Virginia and Prince William County in the last or 2 presidential elections ago, or maybe it was 3, who waited in line for more than an hour and a half. And we don't need people waiting in line for an hour and a half, whether they have COVID or not. We want to make it easier for people to vote. We don't need, we're not going to secure every blue U.S. mailbox, but there's no reason at all. It was said on this floor by someone I respect that anyone has access to the drop boxes. Anyone can do anything to them. They're not secure. That's just not true. The regulations that we anticipate coming from the Board of Elections would provide for security. U.S. mailbox is bolted to the ground. There's no reason something like this can't be as secure. There's no reason it can't be indoors on Election Day in the precincts. We're not talking about throwing shoe boxes out in the streets that are going to blow away. It's just not the case. The senator from Hanover asked how you determine if your vote was received. There's a unique barcode, as was said before, and I think it's worth saying again that if anyone has a question as to whether or not it was brought in that evening, that's what happened to it. But this is our most fundamental right. Let's make our elections smooth. Let's make them easier to cast a vote, and this will actually help on Election Day itself so that people can move in and out of precincts efficiently without being stuck in long lines, breathing on each other. So with that, I ask that we pass the bill.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the junior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator Kiggins, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to rise to speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you. So I just want to echo the sentiment of the senator from Fauquier about our voting process and how sacred that is to us here. I know when I was in the military and just the work that we go through to vote when we're not present, I think we take it for granted a lot of times, how the ease of voting here when we're home and we really, the effort that's put in when we're overseas and just not allowed to walk into a voting booth, it's something that we should hold, with great value, and it's certainly a fundamental part of what makes our country great. So my biggest concern is just voter confidence. We had at the June primary this past year an issue in Virginia Beach where there was a malfunction of our system. The poll workers showed up, they opened the computers, and they could not get people to vote. We couldn't get the ballots to enter into the machine. People were turned away at the polls. Most of us voted provisionally. I was not able to vote. I had to vote provisionally. When you vote provisionally, you have to write it in hand, and then you fill out the back of an envelope that's your name, your address, social security number. Oh, I knew that I had voted provisionally at my ballot place or my polling place, and I thought that it was just us. It turned out to be most of the city of Virginia Beach, which, as we know, is very large. We heard that morning from literally hundreds of people who were voting, who it became a large conspiracy theory all of a sudden because it was only a Republican primary. So a lot of people were very concerned. They were turned away at polls. They voted provisionally, but some people filled out social security numbers, other people did not. Just a lot of inconsistencies. So the confidence that was lost that day in our voting system in Virginia Beach was huge. I still hear people asking questions. So what do we do to resolve that? How are we going to make sure on the morning of November 3rd we don't show up at the polls and we open those computers and we still can't vote and people are turned away? So a large problem with voter confidence. Even just thinking of my own election back in November, and I was one of the people that won, not by a large majority. So, and some of the things, we waited for hours and hours for some of those districts to turn in their polling numbers. So I think there's a lot of inconsistency. I think we missed the nitty-gritty problem is at the ground level. The oversight and accountability for our registrars. What can we do to help train those people to make sure that the whole election process runs smoothly? I too have doubts about the drop boxes and the security of drop boxes and whatnot, but I think we're really missing the root of the problem, which is how to make our elections more secure, restore voter confidence in our elections. I think that's a huge part of the problem. I also worry about our nursing homes and our homebound. I mean, I don't know what happens there. I wonder about that. Is it staff collecting ballots now that families are not allowed in? And so perhaps going forward we can address some of the things that we've discussed, because I think we've highlighted here a lot of just the inconsistencies and places where voters are struggling and now no longer confident in our election process, which I think is a sad statement. Thank you.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the senator from Williamsburg, Senator Mason, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, speaking of the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I wish to associate myself with the eloquent remarks of the senior senator from Richmond City a moment ago, but I rise today having listened yesterday to the debate surrounding the gentleman from Mecklenburg's amendment to this bill regarding the voter files and the list. I've done quite a bit of work on that because I live in a college town. So each year we have somebody who was registered in Williamsburg last year, but they're in Manhattan this year, and yes, occasionally they'll send and ask for an absentee ballot from Manhattan, but Mr. President, checks are in place and we don't do that. But yesterday, as we discussed this, I want to read this section because of the debate from a moment ago. The Department of Elections shall establish a voter list maintenance program using the change of address information supplied by the United States Postal Service through its licensees and by other reliable sources to identify voters whose addresses may have changed. Any such program shall be regular and periodic and shall be conducted at least annually. The program shall be completed not later than 90 days prior to the date of the federal primary or the federal general election. That last sentence, Mr. President, is what made the amendment yesterday out of order. But I bring that up today because a moment ago we heard that it's incredibly important that we put security and regulations in place for the upcoming election. We all agree with that. But we cast a doubt on the same Department of Elections that was not following the law are going to establish those. Well, Mr. President, they have to do this at least annually, and it's my understanding the Department of Elections didn't require our registrars to update that list because they've had quite a year. Local elections, primary elections, Republican and Democrat, and we changed a number of the regulations that they were operating under. So it's been an extraordinarily busy year for our registrar. It's my understanding the Department of Elections just did not want to put that requirement on them, and they're only required to do it annually. So while it may be unfortunate that it will be after the election, that's the understanding that I have, and that the Department of Elections continues to operate well within the bounds of the law. So I hope we'll support this bill, and thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is Senator from Western Fairfax? Senator Marsden rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just as a reminder, voices have been heard on this, through my email, my phone contacts, and I think the other side of the aisle has done a wonderful job at representing their point of view. But it isn't a question of voices not being heard. We have decisions to make. I have a green button and a red button. I intend on supporting the bill, but the voices for the opposition have been heard. They've been well placed, and but I would urge everyone to vote in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is Senator from Roanoke County? Senator Suderline rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking briefly to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, we all know how this vote's going to go after we heard the concerns expressed by one senator and then saying he's going to vote for it anyway. So we all know how the vote's going to go. But just briefly, hearing that laments that this bill's become partisan, who would not expect a bill dealing with the election filed, the penultimate bill of the special session that's been filed at the deadline? It's being passed in a race to hit the window of when it would be allowed under election law to have any changes. So of course it's expressed all those concerns by everyone. And what's interesting is hearing that there's not confidence in the U.S. mail system, and that's why we're including in a bill to spend tax dollars to send everyone prepaid postage for a return on it. I mean, that's interesting of itself. So many others have already expressed the concerns about the boxes that so many of us have. But just going back to yesterday's discussion about why it was important to limit this, like 27 other states that have this chose to do, to actually the voter or someone intimately connected with the voter turning this ballot in. We know that the reality of what's going to happen is, I'm sure that the ads have already gone out for them, is there's going to be folks hired by the political parties to go and solicit these ballots. And for my friends on campaigns that always lament that the field staff isn't respected enough, well, they should get a lot more respect now because they're basically becoming election officials. They're the people that are going to be responsible for getting these ballots in. And I don't think that's the way we want to go. And I definitely don't think we should be doing something like this basically on the eve of the deadline to get it done to change any election law. So I know what's going to happen today, and I find it disappointing.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding Senate Bill 5120? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 5120 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senator desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 21, noes 16.
Ayes 21, no 16. Senate Bill 5120 passes.
Uncontested calendar Senate bills on second reading. Senate Bill 5082, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia by adding a section numbered 8.01-225.03 relating to certain hospices, home care organizations, private providers, assisted living facilities, and adult daycare centers. Immunity from civil liability COVID-19 emergency. Reported from the Committee on the Judiciary with a substitute.
Senator from Western Fairfax, Senator Marsden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the committee substitute, and I would also ask that the bill be taken by for the day for the purpose of another member making a substitute at a later time. But I move the committee substitute.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee substitute be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is adopted. Without objection, Senate Bill 5082 will go by for the day.
Senate Bill 5109, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia by adding a section number 32.1-45.5 relating to Commissioner of Health, nursing home employees and residents, priority for testing, COVID-19 pandemic. Reported from the Committee on Education and Health.
Senator from Russell, Senator Chafin.
Mr. President, may that bill go by for the day.
Without objection, Senate Bill 5109 will go by for the day.
Regular calendar, Senate bills on second reading. Senate Bill 5003, a bill relating to Commission on Civil Rights and Policing established report. Reported from the Committee on Rules, and there are floor amendments.
Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Mr. President, could that bill and also the next bill, which is Senate Bill 5025, go by for the day, sir?
Without objection? Without objection, Senate Bill 5003 will go by for the day. And Senate Bill 5025 will go by for the day.
Senate Bill 5050, a bill relating to parole notice and certification monthly reports, discretionary early consideration. Reported from the Committee on Rehabilitation and Social Services with amendments.
Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I now move that the committee amendments to Senate Bill 5050 be agreed to.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee amendments are agreed to. Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I now move that Senate Bill 5050 be engrossed in advance to its third constitutional reading, sir.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed in advance to its third reading? All in Senator from Arlington, Senator Favola.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hope I have stood up in time. We have now received a request from the finance staff, so this bill actually should be re-referred to finance. I'm glad the amendments were adopted, but the finance staff would like to look at that, so if the body so wishes, I would like to make that motion.
Mr. President, then I would withdraw my motion that it be engrossed in advance to its third constitutional reading, Senate Bill 5050, and ask that after the amendments have been adopted, that it go by for the day.
My motion is that the bill be re-referred to finance.
Mr. President.
Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Mr. President, parliamentary inquiry, could you state what the current motion is?
There are two motions. The superseding motion is to re-refer the bill to the Senate Finance Committee. So that's the superseding motion currently before the body. If Senator Stanley wanted to be heard again.
Mr. President.
Senator from Hanover, Senator McDougal.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, procedurally, we are here today, and then as the senior senator from Fairfax articulated, we will be here on Wednesday. And as of right now, the only committee meeting that has been called between that time is Commerce and Labor for this afternoon. So, Mr. President, if this were to go by for the day and that motion could be made next Wednesday when the gentleman from Rockingham hopefully will be able to be present, that would be appreciated.
Mr. President.
Hold on 1 second. Senator from Arlington, Senator Favola.
I will withdraw my motion and wait until Wednesday and have a conversation with the patron. If that's acceptable to the chair of the Finance Committee,
Mr. President.
it's acceptable to me.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Servo.
If this bill doesn't get to finance by Wednesday, I'm afraid it might not ever get back to the floor in time for us to vote on it. And so could this bill go by temporarily so we can talk about the logistical realities before we make a final decision on it? So by temporarily.
Without objection? Without objection, Senate Bill 5050 will go by temporarily.
Senate Bill 5067, a bill related to the transmission or exposure to the COVID-19 virus emergency. Reported from the Committee on the Judiciary with a substitute, and there are two floor amendments.
Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
We're still working on this, Mr. President, and I would move that it go by for the day.
Without objection, Senate Bill 5067 will go by for the day.
Senate Bill 5107, a bill relating to unemployment compensation, short-time compensation, sunset repeal emergency. Reported from the Committee on Commerce and Labor with amendment.
Senator from Prince William County, Senator McPike.
Mr. President, I move the committee amendment be adopted.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee amendment be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee amendment is adopted. Senator from Prince William County, Senator McPike.
Mr. President, I move the bill be engrossed in advance to its third read.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed in advance to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed in advance to its third reading.
Uncontested calendar Senate bill on first reading. Senate Bill 5031, a bill to amend and reenact 2.2-3300 of the Code of Virginia relating to legal holidays Juneteenth.
Senate will be at ease.
Did you,
I was kind of interested in what Scott said anyway. Scott, what do you do?
He needs to go to finance today because the finance meeting will be Wednesday morning.
We were told that everything would have to be done on Friday. That's what Scott's saying. So
We're trying to get all of our bills out. All of our stuff.
Senate will come to order. The senators will please take their seats. And Madam Clerk, we are returning to page 8.
Senate Bill 5050 on page 8.
Senator from Arlington, Senator Favola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would like to move that the motion by which the committee had accepted the committee amendments on Senate Bill 5050 be reconsidered.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the vote by which the Senate adopted the committee amendments be reconsidered? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 36, no 0.
Ayes 36, no 0. The motion is agreed to. The senator from Arlington, Senator Favola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move the amendment. I move the committee amendments with the recommendation that the amendments be rejected.
Thank the senator. With the recommendation that they be rejected, the question is, shall the committee amendments be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The noes have it. The committee amendments are rejected. Senator from Arlington, Senator Favola.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that this bill go by for the day.
Thank the senator. Without objection, Senate Bill 5050 will go by for the day.
You ready?
Yes. Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
Mr. President, I require the clerk, does that complete the calendar?
Yes, sir.
Senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. President. If we could return to page 7 of the calendar, Senate Bill 5082, I would ask that we reconsider the vote by which we adopted the committee substitute, sir.
Okay. Senator, can we start by reconsidering the buy for the day motion?
Mr. President, I would respectfully move that we reconsider the vote by which Senate Bill 5082 was passed by for the day, sir.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the vote by which the Senate passed Senate Bill 5082 by for the day be reconsidered? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 37, no 0.
Ayes 37, no 0. The motion is agreed to. Senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the courtesy. I would now move that we reconsider the vote by which the committee substitute was agreed to, sir.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the vote by which the committee substitute was agreed to be reconsidered? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 37, no 0.
Ayes 37, no 0. The motion is agreed to. Senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would now ask again that Senate Bill 5082 be passed by for the day, sir.
Without objection, Senate Bill 5082 will go by for the day. Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
Mr. President, I inquire again, is this complete, so the clerks to complete the calendar for today?
I think so.
I'll accept that as a yes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any other business to come before the Senate? Senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise on a point of personal privilege.
Senator has the floor.
As was mentioned by the senator from Richmond, today is the 57th anniversary of the Great March on Washington. It has gone down in the history books. Some of the greatest speeches ever given were given by John Lewis and especially Dr. Martin Luther King, and they resonate with us to this day. I was there that day, and I want to share some of my recollections of what was happening. First of all, in the run-up to that great march, there was a lot of fear in Washington and in the suburbs, and I was living in the suburbs with my family. Over and over, we were told it was going to be violent. All of these people were going to be coming into Washington and creating riots. So when I told my family I was going, they were not happy. And they gave a couple of conditions. One was I had to wear my church clothes. That meant a dress, hose, and white gloves in one of the hottest days ever in Washington. Muggy and miserable, but okay, I would do what my parents said. But the other thing they said is I had to be escorted by a male. I couldn't go on my own. So I picked a man named Hunt Howell to be my escort. And that worked out really well, really well. But the march was so inspirational. It was totally peaceful. I think the only people arrested were a handful, and they were the racists on the other side. And everybody was, I think, so uplifted. And as a result of that march, we got the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act. Now let's move forward. And again, I think our country is facing a crisis. And there are explanations for what's going on, but I think we have to look positively to the future, pass some of the legislation that's before us right here, right now. This is our opportunity to do something significant, truly significant for Virginia. And I hope everybody will agree with me, will recognize there's still so much more work to be done, and let's do it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the Senator from Hampton, Senator Locke, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise on a point of personal privilege.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's quite interesting that I follow my colleague from Northern Fairfax in what she just said, because I'm teaching a class this semester on a literary perspective on protest. And one of the speeches that I will have my class reading is Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream. And so I would just like to share with everyone here today an excerpt from that speech because it follows on what the senator from Northern Fairfax just said. And it also follows on some of the things that we are trying to accomplish here in this session today. And I think that it's very important that we keep in mind that what we are doing is not in vain, and that what Martin Luther King said that day back in 1963 still resonates here today. And what he said was that they were standing at the foot of the Lincoln Memorial, and that five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand signed the Emancipation Proclamation. But 100 years later, we must face the tragic fact that the Negro is still not free. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note. America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we have come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and the desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to open the doors of opportunity to all of God's children. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the senator from Southern Fairfax, Senator Barker, rise?
Mr. President, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I'm glad to follow the senator from Northern Fairfax and the senator from Hampton, and I tell a little bit of a story about myself and my family. I was 20 years behind the senator from Northern Fairfax in that in 1963, when the March on Washington was held, I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, and those people who were heading to Washington to participate in the March on Washington stopped in Knoxville. My father, who was involved in a number of things for dealing with civil rights issues within Knoxville, he and I did go over to where they were staying and actually met with many of the people who were going on to Washington. I was not there in 1963 in Washington, but 20 years later I was in 1983 when there was a large number of people, probably more than there may have actually been in 1963, that came to Washington to deal with a lot of the remnants of the issues that had been first addressed in the 1963 situation. I also brought my daughter to that 1983 significant memorial march on Washington. There she was actually turned 6 months old the day we went to the thing. She had been born in late February in 1983 and was there in late August, the day that she turned 6 months old. And it gave her a good start on things. She later on has participated in many things that have worked to try to move the civil rights issues and the opportunity issues for all children to be able to excel and to have opportunities. She went to college here at Washington and Lee University, then taught for 3 years at Bright Ridge County High School, as well as doing some coaching of the soccer team there, and then got accepted into the New York City Teaching Fellows Program, and for 5 years taught at a high school in the South Bronx, in a neighborhood where the high school graduation rate was 35% before the school had been established there. With working with her fellow teachers at that high school and working with the principal and others, they worked extensively within the community as well as within the school itself. and took a school that had, in a neighborhood that had 35% high school graduation rate and converted it into one that has about an 80% graduation rate now. So they've made a major difference, and dealt with a lot of students who were from marginal income families, as well as those of multiracial and ethnic capacities there. I think that we are now working on addressing a number of these issues here in the Senate, here in the General Assembly, here in Virginia, and I've been very pleased with what I have seen this year, working with all of you on many of the issues, and the progress that I think is being made, and the attention that's being paid to the details, and the sometimes subtle things that those of us who are not from lower income status, those of us who are not from African American, Hispanic, other ethnicities within the population here in Virginia would not necessarily be aware of, because we haven't experienced those same types of slights and discrimination and opportunity denied in many instances. But I think I think all of us here on both sides of the aisle are working, I think, conscientiously to try to improve things in Virginia. I think we did a fantastic job with the budget that we adopted in March. There is a good bit of it that's been put on pause now, but I hope that as we emerge from the situation that we're in right now, that we'll be able to deal with a lot of these issues, starting from infant and maternal mortality issues to pre-kindergarten issues, to the educational issues and the opportunities that are provided to students, to the human services, resources, and programs that help a lot of families and help a lot of children as they grow up, to be able to make us a one Virginia where it doesn't make a difference what your income level is, where it doesn't make a difference what your race is, where your ethnicity is, what your religion is, and those types of things, that we all move forward in a positive way, treating everybody equally in every respect, and having the same opportunities, the same expectations, and trying to provide assistance to everybody. And I look forward to working with all of you to continue this path. We've certainly had a number of issues that we've been dealing with in this special session, criminal justice issues that also, if you look at what's underlying some of the challenges that we've had in the past in those, really have dealt with racism, that have dealt with issues in terms of the different ways that individuals are perceived by both public officials, by the law enforcement community in some instances, the court systems, and all those types of things, and that we make sure that everybody is treated equally in all those respects, as well as in the actual legislation that we pass here. So I look forward to continuing to work with all of you to address these issues, and I think it's important that we continue to pay attention to things such as these the dates that we have here, where on the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington, which has been certainly in my lifetime one of the things that I think has helped move us forward. And I look forward to continuing to work with you on all these things. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senior senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, as we commemorate the March on Washington, and for many children and for many people, that's the speech they remember from Dr. King, maybe a letter from a Birmingham jail. But they don't often focus on what happened after that speech. And in the last year of his life, Dr. King was very disillusioned, had almost lost hope, and in May of 1967, in an interview with Sandra Van Oker on NBC News, said that the dream had almost become a nightmare. Now, why was that? Because after the political gains of the Voting Rights Act, after ending legal segregation, he came to understand that to have true equality, to fully cash in on that promissory note, we had to tackle the economic disparity that over
a century of oppression had caused and hadn't gone away with the wave of a magic wand when legal segregation and disenfranchisement ended. Remember, when he died, by the time he died, he was one of the most hated men in America. He was being challenged as the leader of the civil rights movement because younger generations didn't think he was moving fast enough. He was had gone north to try to address racial inequity there and was met with fierce opposition. I want to read a little bit from his interview with Sandra Van Oker. I must confess that the dream that I had that day has in many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future, but I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments, and I've come to see that we have many more difficulties ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is we have a long way to go, and we are involved in a war on Asian soil, which, if not checked and stopped, can poison the very soul of our nation. I'm not going to say that all of our problems will be solved if the war in Vietnam is ended, but I do say the war makes it infinitely more difficult to deal with those problems. When a nation becomes obsessed with the guns of war, it loses its social perspective, and programs of social uplift suffer. This is just a fact of history, so that we do face many more difficulties as a result of the war. It's much more difficult to really arouse a conscience during a time of war. That is something about a war like this that makes people insensitive. It dulls the conscience. It strengthens the force of reaction, and it brings into being bitterness, hatred, and violence. I think the biggest problem now is we got our gains over the last 12 years at bargain rates, so to speak. It didn't cost the nation anything. In fact, it helped the economic side of the nation to integrate lunch counters and public accommodations. It didn't cost the nation anything to get the right to vote established. Now we're confronting issues that cannot be solved without costing the nation billions of dollars. Now, I think this is where we're getting our greatest resistance. They may put it on many other things, but we can't get rid of slums and poverty without costing something. I feel that nonviolence is really the only way that we can follow, because violence is just so self-defeating. A riot ends up creating more problems for the Negro community than it solves. You can, through violence, burn down a building, but you can't establish justice. You can murder a murderer, but you can't murder through violence. You can murder a hater, but you can't murder hate. And what we're trying to get rid of is hate and injustice and all of these other things that continue the long night of man's inhumanity to man. He died before he could continue his work to create a beloved community. And we recently lost the last surviving speaker who spoke at the March on Washington, who continued that work, Congressman John Lewis. Congressman Lewis, I had the pleasure of seeing here in Richmond when we renamed Arthur Ashe Boulevard. And he gave a rousing speech, getting rid of his prepared remarks, to remind us that the work of the movement's not over, that our franchise is in jeopardy, and that we have to vote as if our lives depend on it, because they do. He saw the moment we are in right now. We need people to pick up the work that's not finished. I think all of us here have the desire to do that in some form. It's not going to be easy. The last thing I remember about Congressman Lewis was his capacity for forgiveness, which shows that the hope that Dr. King put in motion at the March on Washington and never himself lost sight of is still ignited. When he left the ceremony at Arthur Ashe Boulevard, Congressman Lewis was taken to the little Confederate chapel that's at the corner part of the property of the Museum of Fine Arts. In that chapel was an exhibit where they show a recording, or they play a recording of the speech Congressman Lewis gave during the Clinton impeachment, where he talks about how important it is that we come together as a nation and stay united. And as I sat in that chapel and watched a man who had been beaten, not just on the Edmund Pettus Bridge for the right to vote, but also during the Freedom Rides for the right to sit on a bus next to a white person, who sat at lunch counters and got spit on and ketchup thrown on him and shoved in Nashville to integrate the lunch counters, who saw so much bitterness and hatred in his life. And I watched that man listen to that speech. I wept. Because no matter what he went through, no matter how discouraged he got, he never lost hope that we could achieve a beloved community. And in his last message to us, that was published in the New York Times the day of his funeral, he renewed the call to action to all of us to never give up on achieving the beloved community. And there are generations today, born long after the March on Washington, born after the race riots of the 70s, born some during or right around the time the first African American was elected president, who now say that in their generation, unlike mine and all of us here in this room, we have all seen progress in our lifetime in some form or fashion. They've seen regression. There's a young woman I met who graduated from VCU last year who said she was in elementary school in 2008. The first election she voted in was 2016. Think about everything that's happened between 2008 and today. And she said, all I've seen in my life is a rise of racial tension, is an increase of African American men and women killed by police, of declines in economic opportunity for her generation, rising sea levels, climate change, rising student debt. And she said, among my generation, we ask, why bother? Why vote? No one is addressing our needs. No one is speaking to us. No one is listening to us. And that was a slap in the face as I listened to her and thought about how my parents were the first generation in their family to be able to vote, to be able to work and live and eat and shop without having to go separate from white people. And I think about all they went through, and John Lewis went through, and Dr. King went through. And the fact that this generation, Gen Z, some millennials, have lost hope. We got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do to show them we hear them and we care. And this special session and going forward is our opportunity to do it. But we have to pick up the torch and keep striving for that beloved community that Dr. King fought and died for. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is Senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards, rise?
Mr. President, a matter of personal privilege.
Senator, it's the floor.
I too remember vividly the March on Washington, August the 28th, 1963. I was in Roanoke, watching it on black and white TV. But that, more than that, that year, 1963, has parallels to this year. A lot of demonstrations, a lot of anxiety throughout the country. In the spring of 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. was locked up in jail in Birmingham. And as the senior senator from Richmond alluded to, that's where he wrote the letter from a Birmingham jail. The most important, most articulate explanation of the civil rights movement probably ever. He was locked up. He did it without any notes, without any books. It was from his study of theology and history and the previous experience he had had. He sat down and pen and pencil, pencil and paper, and wrote it out. And it's the most important. I've used it many times in teaching Sunday school programs. I say it's probably the most important letter with regard to what we're doing today that anybody could ever see. He explained what he was doing and why in such articulate terms. A month later, he had criticized the Kennedy administration, as many people had up to that point, for not doing anything for civil rights, and the Kennedy administration had not done anything at that point for civil rights. But John Kennedy went on TV in June of 1963, and Bobby Kennedy wrote most of the speech. But he went on TV to announce that his administration was putting forth what became the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And toward the end of that speech, he articulated, was not in the written speech, extemporaneously. He explained a few other paragraphs, completely extemporaneously. And I believe part of that paragraph was, toward the end, was who among us white people would want to trade places with our African-American friends? It really hit a note. It was very personal. And later, Martin Luther King Jr. said the president really hit it out of the ballpark that day. Then 2 months later, we have the March on Washington speech. As I say, I watched it very vividly, and I was very moved by the whole experience, as so many people were at that time. And Martin Luther King Jr., as the senator from Hampton talked about, his speech was really about the promissory note that bounced. Insufficient funds. This country had promised the African-American community something that had never been delivered. It was the check bounced, insufficient funds. But toward the end of that speech, he went back to something he had said many times before in churches, the concept of, I have a dream. He had never said that publicly other than in different sermons he'd given in other churches. It was not brand new, but it was not in the written speech. And as he was ending his speech, Mahalia Jackson, I think it was, kept saying to Martin Luther King, he was up on the stage behind him, she kept saying, Martin, tell him about the dream. Tell him about the dream. And seamlessly he went right into, I have a dream. It was not in the written speech. It was something he had said before, but never said there. And the speech became the I have a dream speech, and not just the insufficient check speech. It was moving, and the similarities between 63 and this year are similar. There have been a lot of demonstrations, a lot of things going on, but progress started being made. And the next year, the 64 Civil Rights Act, and the following year, the 65 Voting Rights Act were passed. A lot was done those years, and the demonstrations got it started. And we realized we had to do something to bring this country together. And I think it's very important that we remember what happened in 1963 in this 57th year of the March on Washington, in the March on Washington speech. I remember on TV, it was absolutely packed. It was riveting. From the Lincoln Memorial, John Lewis and Martin Luther King Jr. and others gave these fantastic speeches, and I think it changed the world. And today, with what's happening in this country today, we can change the world again. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senator from Arlington, Senator Favola, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise for a simple announcement.
Senator has the floor.
The Rehab and Social Services Committee is doing its part to continue to build community. We have a card here for Senator Reeves. It's a sort of a cheery card. For those of you who have not had an opportunity to sign on to the card, please come by my desk. Perhaps you should come single file and bring your own pen, and remember to sanitize your hands afterwards. But otherwise, we would be delighted to have you send a message to Senator Reeves. Thank you, Mr. President.
No mail.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard? For what purpose does the junior senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrissey, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise for a brief point of personal privilege.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, 65 years ago today, a 14-year-old boy from Chicago was brutally murdered in Mississippi. He was falsely accused of flirting with a white woman. It is ironic that his murderers were afforded due process and were acquitted. But Emmett Till, that 14-year-old boy from Chicago, was never afforded due process. His mother demanded that an open casket funeral be held so that the atrocities associated with his brutal murder would be evidenced to the entire world. Today, 65 years later, it's important that the Commonwealth of Virginia and that our nation remember that, and that we never, ever again allow a situation for somebody to not only be treated like Emmett Till was, but for anybody not to be afforded due process. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I have a motion, and that is that when we adjourn today, we do so in the honor and memory of Emmett Till, who, again, 65 years ago this day, at 14 years old, was murdered, having been falsely accused of flirting with a white woman. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard? Senator from James City County, Senator Norman. Seeing none, call the senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn until 4 p.m. on Monday. And in so doing, we do so in the name and honor of Emmett Till.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the Senate stand adjourned? Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Sasslaw.
Mr. President, I just wanted to announce that the Commerce and Labor Committee will meet 10 minutes after adjournment in this room.
Thank the senator. Reporting announcements on the desk.
General Laws and Technology will meet Monday at 10 a.m. This will be a virtual meeting. General Laws, Monday, 10 a.m.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do any other senators wish to be recognized? Seeing none, the question is, shall the Senate stand adjourned until 4 p.m. on Monday, and that when we adjourn, we do so in the honor and the memory of Emmett Till? All in favor of the motion will say,
Mr. President.
Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Just speaking to the motion, I just want to make sure we understand the motion. On Monday, when we return, it will be a pro forma session. Is that correct? So
That's correct.
We are adjourning until Monday, but we will not physically be back until Wednesday. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct. There will be a pro forma at 4 p.m. on Monday, and we're actually actually not in full session until Wednesday.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the Senate stand adjourned until 4 p.m. on Monday? And then when we do so in the honor and the memory of Emmett Till. All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned until 4 p.m. on Monday in the honor and memory of Emmett Till.